Welcome back to the frontier, travelers. Settle into your chair and turn up the volume, because today's journey takes us to the far-flung edges of the galaxy, where love is rare and danger is constant. If you appreciate good stories and old-fashioned honor, leave a like and subscribe. The silence of the void was a lie. Out here, in the forgotten lanes of the Iridian expanse, silence was just the space between alarms. A high-pitched, insistent shriek sliced through the low growl of a slide guitar riff echoing in the cockpit of the Betsy. Red light pulsed across Rusty Vance's face, painting his rugged features in the color of blood and warning. He didn't flinch. He just took a slow drag from his synth cigar, the cherry-red tip glowing like a distant dying star, and blew a perfect smoke ring toward the cracked viewport. "I'm aware, Betsy," he said, his voice a low rumble like gravel settling in a dry riverbed. "Awareness does not recalibrate a failing Krillian plasma regulator, Rusty," the ship's AI replied. Her voice was crisp, calm, and laced with the weary condescension of a wife who had warned her husband about this very thing 1,000 times. "Core temperature is exceeding safety parameters by 12%. Life support is fluctuating. At this rate, we have approximately one standard cycle before we become a very stylish, very inert coffin." Rusty ran a hand through his dark, messy hair. He looked at the main console, a flickering mess of error codes and amber alerts. The old girl was hurting. Betsy wasn't just a ship, she was a part of him, an extension of his own stubborn, scarred soul. They'd been through hell and back, from the corporate wars on Mesa Prime to the asteroid mine riots of Kyber's Drift. He wasn't about to let her die out here in the quiet dark. He tapped a few commands onto the nav screen, his thick, calloused fingers moving with an economy born of decades at the helm. A regional star chart shimmered into view, a web of trade routes, dead zones, and celestial bodies. A single system blinked with a tantalizing green dot. "There," he grunted, pointing with the cigar. "Tectonus. Uncharted, but scans show pre-collapse tech signatures. There's a chance." Betsy's reply was instantaneous and glacial. "Tectonus is not uncharted. It is interdicted. It is flagged under Pan-Galactic Accord 734 as a level Omega quarantine. Unauthorized approach is punishable by asset seizure and summary execution. The files are thin, but they all mention a highly aggressive isolationist populace. It's a suicide run, Rusty." "Everything's a suicide run, Bets," he countered, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. He killed the blues track, the sudden quiet in the cockpit feeling heavier than the noise. What's one more? He didn't need to look at the worn photograph clipped to the console, the faded image of a woman's smile he could never quite forget, to know why he couldn't give up. The broken promise was a debt that could only be paid by moving forward, by surviving, always surviving. He grabbed the flight stick, the worn leather of the grip molding to his palm like an old friend's handshake. "Strap in, we're going in quiet." "A contradiction in terms," Betsy sighed, her voice a digital ghost of resignation as the ship groaned in protest. "Lowering thermal emissions and engaging stealth baffles. I hope they don't notice the 40-ton brick of failing machinery screaming through their atmosphere." The approach was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Rusty piloted the Betsy on the edge of a stall, using the planet's upper ionosphere to mask their entry signature. Metal screamed. Alarms blared and died. The ship shuddered like a beast in its death throes, and Rusty wrestled with the controls, his muscles bunched and corded under his leather vest, his jaw set like granite. He wasn't a pilot anymore. He was a bronco buster, taming a wild metal beast as it plummeted through a sky the color of a deep bruise. He broke through the cloud cover, and a world of impossible green burst into view below. It was a raw, primal landscape. Jungles, thick and ancient carpeted continents. Mountains like broken teeth scraped the sky. Rivers, wide and silver, snaked through the dense foliage. There were no cities, no spaceports, no signs of the civilization the old charts had hinted at. Just the planet, wild and untamed. He found what he was looking for in a deep shadowed valley, the skeletal remains of a derelict outpost, half swallowed by the relentless vegetation. With a final bone-jarring shudder, he brought the Betsy down in a clearing a few clicks away, the landing gear sinking deep into the soft, damp earth. The engines died with a long, final sigh. Silence. Rusty unstrapped himself, the muscles in his back and shoulders aching. He grabbed his blaster pistol, a heavy, reliable piece of hardware, and a field kit. "I'm going out. Keep comms silent unless it's the end of the world. For us, it very well might be, Betsy retorted dryly. Try not to get eaten, Rusty. The upholstery is new. The moment the ramp lowered, the air of Tectonus hit him like a physical blow. It was thick, heavy with the scent of alien pollen, wet earth, and decay. The humidity clung to his skin instantly. The sounds were a symphony of the savage, the chittering of unseen creatures, the distant cry of some great aerial predator, the ceaseless hum of insects. Towering trees, their trunks as wide as his ship, formed a canopy so dense that the daylight was filtered into a dim, emerald twilight. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had walked on 100 hostile worlds. His senses were on fire, cataloging every snapped twig, every flicker of movement in the periphery. This was a hunter's world, and he knew that right now, he was the prey. It took him nearly an hour to reach the ruins. The outpost was ancient, its metal bulkheads corroded and covered in thick pulsing vines. The architecture was unfamiliar, elegant, and yet brutally functional. It felt like a tomb. Inside, he found what he was looking for, a maintenance hub, its consoles smashed but its power conduits relatively intact. And there, nestled in a web of crystalline circuits, was the regulator. A perfect match. Its casing was grimy but unbroken. A wave of relief washed over him, so potent it almost made him dizzy. He carefully detached the component, the delicate mechanism cool and heavy in his hand. Victory. It was a small one in the grand scheme of his life, but it was a victory nonetheless. It meant he'd live to fly another day, to keep running. That was his first mistake. Relief makes a man careless. As he turned to leave, a shadow fell over the doorway. He looked up, his hand instinctively going for his blaster. It was too late. They emerged from the jungle, moving with a silent, fluid grace that was both beautiful and terrifying. Women, at least a dozen of them, all impossibly tall and powerfully built, their bodies a canvas of coiled muscle and tribal markings etched onto their skin. They wore harnesses of leather and woven fiber, carrying long, energy-tipped spears and short, curved blades. Their faces were fierce, beautiful, and utterly devoid of mercy. Leading them was one who seemed carved from the planet itself. She was taller than the rest, her presence an undeniable force of nature. Her hair was a cascade of white braids, and her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, were locked on him. She carried no spear, only a wickedly sharp axe resting on her shoulder. This was not just a warrior. This was a queen. Rusty's hand froze an inch from his pistol. He wasn't an idiot. He knew a losing fight when he saw one. 12-1 were odds he might take on a good day against drunken miners. Against these hunters in their own element, it was suicide. He slowly raised his empty hand, the plasma regulator still clutched in the other. "I mean you no harm," he said, his voice steady. "My ship is damaged. I only needed a part. I'll leave now." The white-haired woman, Vespera, stepped forward. She didn't look at his face. Her gaze was fixed on the regulator in his hand. A low growl rumbled in her chest, a sound that the jungle itself seemed to echo. "You tread on sacred ground, off-worlder," she said, her voice deep and resonant, laced with an authority that needed no weapon to enforce it. "You steal from the bones of our ancestors, and you speak of leaving?" She gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. Before Rusty could even process the command, they were on him. It wasn't a chaotic rush, but a coordinated, tactical takedown. One warrior swiped his legs out from under him with the butt of her spear. As he fell, another pinned his arms. He thrashed, his raw strength surprising them, and managed to throw one of them off. For a second he thought he might break free. Then a sudden, searing pain exploded at the base of his skull, and the world dissolved into a dizzying kaleidoscope of green and black. His last conscious thought was of the matriarch's stormy eyes looking down at him, not with hatred, but with a cold, absolute certainty. He had broken her law, and on Tectonus the law was as savage and as unforgiving as the world itself. The darkness took him completely. He awoke to the sensation of cool stone against his cheek and the dull, throbbing drumbeat of a colossal headache. Consciousness returned not as a gentle dawn, but as a rusty shutter being forced open, scraping and groaning. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. The air was different, cool, damp, smelling of moss and something vaguely metallic, like ozone after a storm. He wasn't in the jungle. Rusty pushed himself up slowly, his muscles protesting every movement. His head felt like it had been used for target practice. He was in a chamber of sorts, the walls smooth and dark, curving upwards into shadow. There were no bars, no energy fields. The only light came from glowing fungi clustered in the corners, casting a soft, ethereal blue glow. The exit was a perfect, dark archway, unguarded. A test. He knew it instantly. An invitation to try and fail. He was a prisoner, but this wasn't a standard holding cell. It felt more like a den, a place an animal would be kept. He checked himself over. His blaster was gone, his field kit too. They'd left him his worn leather vest and tactical pants, but he felt naked without the familiar weight of his sidearm at his hip. The plasma regulator was gone too. Two of the warrior women appeared in the archway, their forms silhouetted against a brighter light beyond. They were as tall and formidable as he remembered, their faces impassive masks of disciplined strength. One of them gestured with her spear. The message was clear. Move. He rose to his full height, rolling his shoulders to work out the stiffness, a silent act of defiance. He wouldn't show weakness. He wouldn't show fear. He was Rusty Vance, a man who had faced down corporate kill squads and alien monstrosities in the dark between worlds. He would face this with the same granite resolve. He followed them out of the chamber and into a city that stole his breath. It was carved into the very bones of the planet. Gigantic, petrified trees, wider than star freighters, formed the central pillars of the metropolis. Their upper branches were laced with elegant bridges and living quarters that glowed with soft internal light. The city descended into the mountain, a vertical cascade of terraces, waterfalls, and sculpted rock. Technology and nature weren't just coexisting. They were fused, one and the same. Luminous crystal veins pulsed with energy along the stone walls, and the air hummed, not with the noise of machinery, but with a low, organic thrum. As they escorted him along a wide, winding path, he became an object of intense curiosity. The inhabitants, all women, stopped what they were doing to watch him pass. Artisans with strong, clever hands paused their work on intricate weavings. Warriors sparring in open-air training grounds lowered their spears, their eyes tracking his every move. Children, their features a mix of fierce beauty and innocence, peeked from behind their mother's legs. Their gazes held no malice, but a raw, undisguised wonder. He was an anomaly, a creature from another reality, a male. He could feel their eyes on his muscles, his height, the scars that crisscrossed his arms. He was being appraised, judged, measured. His escorts led him to the heart of the city, into a vast cavern that served as a throne room. The scale was immense, humbling. The ceiling was 100 meters high, lost in shadow, with thick roots and glowing flora hanging down like natural chandeliers. A waterfall cascaded down one wall into a serene pool, its sound echoing in the massive space. At the far end, on a dais formed from the interwoven roots of a colossal, ancient tree, sat the matriarch, Vespera. She was even more imposing here in the seat of her power. She wore ceremonial armor of polished bone and dark, iridescent metal that accentuated her powerful physique. Her white braided hair was adorned with a simple circlet of obsidian. She was the embodiment of this world. Beautiful, dangerous, and utterly untamed. Rusty was halted at the base of the dais. The two guards took up positions behind him, their spear tips glinting in the blue light. For a long moment, Vespera simply watched him, her stormy eyes dissecting him piece by piece. The silence stretched, heavy and absolute. "The Skyman is awake," she finally said, her voice echoing off the stone. It was a statement of fact, cold and clear. "You stand accused of defiling the resting place of our ancestors and stealing a sacred power conduit." She held up the plasma regulator. In her hand it looked less like a piece of machinery and more like a holy relic. Rusty met her gaze without flinching. "My ship was dying," he said, his voice a low counterpoint to hers. "I needed the part to survive. It was wreckage, abandoned. I didn't desecrate anything." A murmur went through the assembled warriors flanking the throne. Vespera raised a hand and the sound ceased instantly. "To you it is wreckage," she replied, her voice dangerously soft. "To us, it is a monument, the story of our beginning. The great ship that brought the first mothers to Tectonus, fleeing a plague that withered our men and turned our worlds to dust. The parts you call wreckage are the last remnants of our history. You stole from our souls, Skyman, to mend your machine." He had no answer to that. He had seen the component as a means to an end, a path to his own survival. He hadn't considered its meaning, its history. It was the curse of the forager, the survivor, The universe was a collection of parts, some useful, some not. He had never had the luxury of seeing it any other way. Your reason does not erase your crime, Vespera continued, rising from her throne. She moved with a liquid grace that belied her size and power, descending the steps of the dais until she stood just before him. She was taller than him by a head, and he had to look up slightly to meet her eyes. The air between them crackled with a tension that was almost physical. Our law is simple. A life for a life. You have taken from us. Now, you must give. She circled him slowly, like a predator inspecting its catch. But you are not like the raiders who trouble our skies. You do not carry their stench of greed and cruelty. There is strength in you. Our society does not waste strength. So you are given a choice. She stopped in front of him again, her presence overwhelming. Your sentence can be one of two paths. The first is servitude. You will give your strength to the community. You will quarry stone, fell trees, and help raise our defenses until a debt of labor, decided by me, is paid. You will be fed, sheltered, and you will live. Rusty's jaw tightened. Servitude, a collar, no matter how gilded. To be owned, to have his freedom stripped away and his days dictated by another's will. It was a death of a different kind. The very thought was a poison in his veins. He was a forastero, an outsider. His freedom was the only thing he truly owned. And the second path? He asked, his voice rough. A faint, hard smile touched Vespera's lips. The second path is the path of the warrior, the trial by fire. You may fight for your freedom in the arena. You will face our champion, Jock Carr. If you win, your debt is paid in blood and honor. You will be free to take your conduit and leave Tectonus with our word that you will not be harmed. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. But know this, Skyman. No one has ever defeated our champion. To choose the arena is to choose a warrior's death. There it was. The choice between a long, slow death of the soul or a quick, violent death of the body. For a man like Rusty Vance, it wasn't a choice at all. He thought of his life, a long, lonely road stretching behind him, littered with compromises and regrets. He thought of the broken promise, the ghost that drove him ever onward. Servitude meant stopping. It meant surrendering, and he would rather die on his feet than live on his knees. He looked Vespera straight in the eye, a flicker of his old, charming defiance sparking in his own. Doesn't sound like much of a choice to me, he said. I'll fight. The matriarch's expression was unreadable, but for a fraction of a second he saw something shift in the depths of her stormy eyes. It might have been respect, or it might have been pity. So be it, she declared, her voice once again ringing with absolute authority. The trial is set for 3 days' time. Let the Skyman be given quarters, and let him prepare for the honor of his death. As the guards turned him to lead him away, his gaze lingered on Vespera. He had made his choice, the only one his code would allow. Now he had 3 days to figure out how to survive it. The 3 days leading up to the trial by fire were a study in disciplined patience. Rusty was given quarters carved from the living rock, overlooking a vast subterranean cavern where waterfalls fell like silver threads into a bottomless mist. It was beautiful, but it was still a cage. He was fed well, roasted meats from alien beasts, strange sweet fruits, and a clean, sharp-tasting water. Guards, silent and statuesque, were posted at his door day and night. They never spoke, but their eyes followed his every move. He spent the time not in frantic preparation but in a quiet, focused ritual. He stretched his aching muscles, feeling the deep-seated weariness of 1,000 brawls and 100 worlds. He meditated not for peace but for clarity, replaying every fight he'd ever had in his mind's eye. He cataloged his injuries, his weaknesses, his strengths. He was a machine of survival, and this was his diagnostic phase. He knew brute force would not win this. His opponent would be younger, stronger, and fighting on home turf. He would have to rely on the one thing that had kept him alive this long, the cunning of a cornered animal, and a well of sheer, stubborn will forged in the loneliness of deep space. On the evening of the second day, she came to him. Vespera entered his chamber without a sound, her presence filling the space, diminishing it. She was not in her ceremonial armor, but in simpler, practical leather and cloth that did nothing to hide the powerful lines of her body. She stood in the center of the room, her arms crossed, her stormy eyes fixed on him. "You are calm," she observed. It was not a question. Most who face the trial spend their last hours screaming at the stone. Rusty was sitting on a low rock ledge, sharpening a piece of shale against the floor. He didn't look up immediately, continuing the slow, rhythmic scraping. "Screaming doesn't help," he said, his voice low. "It just makes your throat sore for the fight. You chose this path knowing it meant your death. I wish to understand why." He finally stopped and looked up, meeting her gaze. The blue, fungal light carved shadows onto his face, making him look older, more weary than he was. "You offered me a collar or a blade, my soul or my body. I've lived a long time with a heavy soul, lady. I'm not keen on adding a collar to the collection." Vespera's expression was unreadable. "Here, the soul of the one serves the strength of the many. We do not have the luxury of your kind of pride. We have survived because every warrior, every builder, every mother gives their life and their will to the tribe. To Tectonus, your self is a disease we cleansed from our blood long ago." "Maybe," Rusty conceded, a wry twist to his lips. "But out in the dark, self is all a man has. There's no tribe at your back when your engines fail in the void. There's just you, the promises you've kept, and the ones you've broken." His eyes held a distant flicker of pain, the ghost of his past, rearing its head. She saw it. He knew she did. Her gaze softened for an imperceptible instant. "This champion you will face, Jakakar. He is the pinnacle of our way. He was born and bred for this. He fights with the strength of all our ancestors flowing through him. He has never known defeat. Everyone's undefeated," Rusty rumbled, getting to his feet. "Until they're not." He stood before her, the difference between them stark. He was a creature of scars and expediency, a patchwork of survival. She was a monolith of purpose and tradition. They were two opposing forces, magnetic and repellent, locked in a silent battle of wills. "I hope for your sake, Skyman," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "that your pride is as strong as our faith." She turned and left as silently as she arrived, leaving him alone with the weight of her words and the echo of her powerful presence. The day of the trial dawned, not with sunlight but with a change in the thrum of the city. A deep, resonant drumming began, a heartbeat that pulsed through the very stone beneath his feet. His guards entered and handed him a simple leather harness and a pair of worn, rugged trousers. They offered no weapons. He was led out, not up into the light, but down, deeper into the planet's core. The path opened into a massive natural amphitheater. It was a perfect bowl of rock open to the cavernous sky of the city above. Thousands of warrior women lined the tiered ledges, their faces grim, their spears held upright, forming a forest of deadly steel. They were not cheering. They were bearing witness. In the center of the sandy floor, a rack of weapons was driven into the earth. Brutal, primitive things. Heavy axes, spiked clubs, short, thick-bladed swords. Jakakar was already there, standing with his back to him, his hands clasped behind him. He was enormous, taller even than Vespera, his back a mountain range of muscle etched with the same tribal markings as the others. When he turned, Rusty saw a face that was young, focused, and utterly devoid of doubt. He was a perfect weapon, honed by a lifetime of singular purpose. Vespera stood on a high ledge, her presence commanding the entire arena. She raised her hands, and the drumming stopped. "The law is invoked," she cried, her voice ringing out. "The Skyman, Rusty Vance, has chosen the trial by fire to answer for his crimes. He faces the champion of Tectonus, Jakakar. They will fight until one yields or one falls. Let the ancestors bear witness. Let the trial begin." A deep roar went up from the assembled warriors, a single unified sound of primal approval. Jakakar strode to the weapon rack and selected a massive two-handed axe, a crescent of polished obsidian that looked like it could split a man in two. He tested its weight, swinging it in a deadly, whistling arc. Rusty walked to the rack and considered his options. The axes and clubs were too heavy, designed for a strength greater than his own. He needed speed and precision. He chose a short sword, its blade thick and leaf-shaped, its hilt wrapped in rough leather. It felt clumsy, unbalanced, but it would have to do. They faced each other across 30 yards of packed earth. Jakakar gave a slight nod, a gesture of warrior's respect. Rusty returned it. Then the champion let out a deafening roar and charged. It was like being hit by a freight hauler. Jakakar's opening blow was a downward cleave that Rusty barely dodged, the axe head burying itself a foot deep in the ground where he'd been standing. The impact shuddered through his bones. The champion was impossibly fast for his size. The next few minutes were a blur of desperate survival. Rusty was purely on the defensive, using his smaller size and agility to stay just outside the lethal arc of the axe. He parried, he dodged, he retreated. Jokkar was a whirlwind of relentless aggression, each swing of his axe carrying the force of a battering ram. A glancing blow caught Rusty on the ribs, sending a bolt of pure agony through his side and stealing his breath. He stumbled back, tasting blood. He was losing. He knew it. He couldn't win a direct fight of strength and attrition. He needed to change the rules of the game. He wasn't in a sanctioned duel. He was in a fight for his life. He feinted left, and as Jokkar swung to intercept, Rusty dropped, kicking a spray of sand and grit directly into the champion's face. Jokkar bellowed in surprise and rage, momentarily blinded. It was the opening Rusty needed. He didn't press a direct attack. Instead, he lunged low, swinging his short sword not at the man but at the back of his knee. The blade bit deep. Jokkar roared in pain, his leg buckling. The invincible champion faltered, his charge broken. For the first time, a flicker of something other than perfect confidence appeared in his eyes. Rusty pressed his advantage, but not with strength, with cunning. He became a ghost, a phantom of 1,000 dirty fights in the back alleys of forgotten starports. He used Jokkar's rage against him, drawing him into wild, off-balance swings and then striking at his limbs, his joints. It was not a noble fight. It was the brutal, efficient calculus of survival. The end came suddenly. Jokkar, bleeding from a dozen small cuts and favoring his wounded leg, put all his remaining strength into one final, desperate swing. Rusty didn't meet it. He ducked under it, the wind of the axe passing over his head, and drove his shoulder hard into the champion's wounded leg. Jokkar went down with a crash, his axe flying from his grip. In a single, fluid motion, Rusty was on top of him, the point of his sword pressed against the soft flesh of the champion's throat. Silence. The entire arena held its breath. Jokkar lay on his back, his chest heaving, his face a mask of disbelief and pain. But there was no fear in his eyes, only defiance. "Do it, Skyman," he rasped. "A warrior's death." Rusty looked down at the defeated champion. Then his gaze drifted up to the high ledge where Vespera stood, watching, her face an unreadable carving of stone. He could feel thousands of eyes on him, waiting for the killing blow. This was their way, the law. But as he looked at the proud warrior beneath him, he didn't see an enemy. He saw a man defending his home, his people, his honor. He saw a reflection of a code he himself barely remembered clinging to. Killing him now would be an execution, not a victory. And Rusty Vance, for all his sins, was no executioner. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered the sword. He got off the champion's chest and stood up. Then, in an act that defied all expectation, all tradition, he extended his hand to the fallen warrior. Jokkar stared at the offered hand, as if it were a venomous snake. The crowd murmured, a sound of confusion rippling through the stands. This was not in their law. This was not in their history. Rusty kept his hand outstretched, his face grim. "Get up, champion," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying in the stillness. "The fight is over." From her throne, Vespera's eyes widened, a storm of shock and something else, something akin to awe, brewing in their depths. The man from the sky had not only won, he had rewritten their law with a single, incomprehensible act of honor. The silence in the arena was a physical weight, heavier than the humid air. Jokkar, the undefeated champion, stared at Rusty's outstretched hand as if it were a strange and complex piece of alien technology. Confusion warred with a lifetime of warrior conditioning on his face. Behind him, the thousands of women on the ledges were a sea of stunned stillness. This simple gesture of mercy was more alien to them than Rusty himself. Slowly, his pride battling his disbelief, Jokkar took Rusty's hand. Rusty's grip was firm, a gesture of equal standing, not of a victor helping the vanquished. He pulled the massive warrior to his feet. The two men stood for a moment, breathing heavily, covered in sweat and dirt, their blood mingling on their clasped hands. A bond had been forged in the space between a killing blow and a show of honor. From the high ledge, Vespera's voice cut through the silence, sharp and absolute. "The trial is concluded," she declared. Her voice did not betray the storm of thoughts behind her eyes. "The Skyman has won his freedom. The debt is paid." She made a sharp gesture, and the assembled warriors, as if released from a trance, began to file out of the arena, their murmurs a low thunder. Rusty was not taken back to his cell. He was escorted to a chamber of healing, where attendants, Older women with knowing hands and calm eyes tended to his wounds. They cleaned his cuts with an herbal salve that soothed the fire and applied a poultice to his bruised ribs that drew out the deep, aching pain. They worked in silence, their movements efficient and respectful. He was no longer a prisoner. He was the man who had defeated their champion, and in doing so, had shown them a strength they didn't know existed. His freedom was won. He had the regulator. He could walk back to the Betsy and disappear into the void, leaving Tectonus as just another scar, another story to be washed away by the lonely miles between stars. And yet, he stayed. Something held him there, the unresolved current in Vespera's eyes, a feeling that his business on this wild, beautiful world was not quite finished. He found her standing on a high balcony overlooking the nocturnal city. The blue glow of the fungi cast soft light on her strong features. Below, the life of her people went on, a quiet hum of purpose. She did not turn as he approached, her gaze fixed on the vista. "My champion is shamed," she said, her voice quiet, devoid of its earlier public authority. "You have broken him." "No," Rusty replied, standing beside her but leaving a respectful distance. "I beat him. There's a difference. Shame is a choice. He fought with honor. There's no shame in that." He looked out at the city carved from the planet's bones. "You have a strong people. We are survivors." She corrected him, finally turning to face him. The proximity was electric. "We survive. But survival is a knife's edge, Skyman. You think we are isolated by choice alone?" This was it. The truth behind the quarantine. The reason for the fierce defense of their borders. "The plague that brought us here," she began, her voice low and intense. "It did not just kill our men. It left a weakness in our bloodline. Our males are few and they are fragile, prone to sickness. Jakakar is a miracle, the strongest in generations. Our future is a delicate thing." She paused, her gaze searching his. "And there are wolves in the stars who know of our weakness. Corsairs, scum like Draxus Korg and his marauders. They have probed our defenses for cycles, looking for a way in. They see a world of women and believe it is a world ripe for the taking. Draxus Korg." Rusty knew the name. A brutal slaver and pirate who preyed on isolated colonies. A man with no honor, no code. "We fight them off," Vespera continued, a fire entering her eyes. "We are strong, but they are relentless. Their ships are better armed. We win with blood and sacrifice. Each time we lose more than we can afford." She took a step closer, closing the distance between them. "You fight with a cunning we do not possess, a survivor's instinct. You defeated Jakakar not with strength, but with a lifetime of experience I can see carved into your soul. You understand the wolves." The unspoken offer hung in the air between them, thick and heavy with consequence. It wasn't a sentence or a command. It was a plea, wrapped in the steel of a queen's pride. "Our law said you must fight or serve," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "You fought and you won your freedom, but now, I am asking you to stay, not as a servant, as an ally, as a teacher, as more." She reached out and for the first time her hand touched him, her fingers resting lightly on the leather over his chest. "Help us. Stand with us. Stand with me. There is a place for you here, Rusty Vance. A home. A home." The word hit him harder than Jakakar's axe. It was the one thing he had been running from his entire life. A home meant roots. It meant connection. It meant making a promise he was terrified of breaking. The faded photograph on the Betsy's console flashed in his mind. The smiling face, the trust in her eyes, the promise he had failed to keep. The ghost of that failure was the fuel that kept his engines burning, pushing him ever onward into the lonely dark. To stay here with this powerful, magnificent woman would be to invite that ghost back, to risk that kind of failure all over again. He looked into her stormy eyes and she saw his answer before he spoke a word. The pain and conflict in his gaze was a language she now understood. He gently covered her hand with his own. His touch was warm, solid. "A man like me, I don't build homes, Vespera. I just pass through them. My road only goes one way, forward." He saw the flicker of hurt in her eyes and hated himself for putting it there. "But my code says I don't leave a debt unpaid. You showed me your world's law. I'll show you mine." For the next 10 cycles, Rusty did not leave. He worked tirelessly, not as a servant but as a strategist. He walked their perimeter defenses, showing them the weaknesses a man like Korg would exploit. He took their primitive energy spears, and using the Betsy's fabricators, showed them how to craft focused plasma charges, turning defensive tools into devastating anti-personnel weapons. He trained their warriors in guerrilla tactics, in the art of the ambush, the dirty tricks of fighting a technologically superior foe. He worked with Jukkar, not as a victor to the vanquished but as a fellow warrior, earning the champion's grudging, then absolute respect. He gave them a fighting chance. It was all he could give. The day he was ready to leave, Vespera met him at the Betsy's ramp. The new plasma regulator was installed, and the ship's engines hummed with a healthy, stable power. The air was thick with unspoken words. "So the forastero returns to his lonely road," she said. It was not an accusation, but a statement of melancholy fact. "It's the only road I know," he replied, his voice rough. She held out her hand. In her palm lay a small, intricately carved pendant of obsidian, the same material as her circlet and Jukkar's axe. "A piece of Tectonus," she said, "so you do not forget the home you could have had." He took it, its surface cool and smooth against his calloused skin. He had nothing to offer in return but the truth. "I won't forget." He turned and walked up the ramp, the metal groaning under his weight. He didn't look back. He couldn't. In the cockpit, Betsy's voice chimed, laced with its signature sarcasm, but softer than usual. "Well, for a man who went down for a spare part, you certainly made an impression. Shall I add rewriting feudal law and training a warrior army to your list of special skills?" "Just fly the ship, Bets," Rusty mumbled, settling into the pilot's seat. He guided the Betsy into the sky, the green, vibrant world of Tectonus shrinking in the viewport. He could see a lone figure standing in the clearing where he had landed, watching him go until his ship was just another star in the vast, indifferent night. He clenched his fist around the obsidian pendant, the sharp edges digging into his palm. He had won his freedom, but as he engaged the star drive and the blues guitar began to weep through the speakers, he had never felt more alone. The choice of the outsider was always the same, to leave a part of yourself behind and call it freedom. True honor isn't found in victory, but in the choices a man makes when he has nothing left to gain. The road is long and lonely, but it's better when we travel together. If this story touched you, subscribe and share it with a friend who appreciates the old code of honor.